Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head. As you might be able to tell from my eyes, I'm not 100% at my best this week, hence the slightly late edition of the RDX Sports Podcast this week. But after such a huge night we had at the weekend, we could not let this week pass without bringing you the last word on UFC 320. What a fight night we had. What an event we had from T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. UFC 320 was an absolute banger once the main card kicked in. Prelims were a little bit slow, let's be honest. Lots of decisions on the early prelims. Things started to warm up once we got to the TV prelims, and then we headed into the main card, the pay-per-view portion of the event, which delivered just on almost every level. It was a really, really fun, well put together fight card. Great performances, and a champion reclaiming his throne as Alex Pereira returns to the top of the UFC light heavyweight division and maybe looks to set his sights on even bigger, heavier things a little bit further down the line. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive straight into it with our UFC 320 recap. This is the last word on UFC 320. All right, we have to kick off with the main event. Alex Pereira taking on Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev, the man who won the title from Alex Pereira earlier this year. Ankalaev coming into this fight super confident, as you would. You've just defeated the former two-division world champion. You've only lost once, and that was to a last-second submission that you shouldn't really have tapped to. So, to all intents and purposes, he will have felt like he was basically an unbeaten fighter. This was a demolition job. There is no way, no two ways about it. Alex Pereira went in there and absolutely demolished Magomed Ankalaev. And here's how he did it. The first fight, Alex Pereira was not at 100%. There were rumblings after the fight that maybe he wasn't at his best. And in the lead up to this fight, he said that he was probably only at about 40% for that fight. When people start making quote-unquote excuses and start trying to justify poor performances in prior fights, it does raise a red flag or two. It's like, well, is he just making an excuse here? Is he trying to convince himself? No, we saw on Saturday night the full fat Alex Pereira, the one at his absolute best, fully fueled up, good to go, rather than the somewhat depleted version that we saw get bullied a little bit by Magomed Ankalaev in the first fight. That did not happen here. Alex Pereira literally ran out of his corner from the very start, which is not Alex Pereira like at all. He's very stoic with his facial features, and his approach kind of matches. He kind of just walks forward slowly, walks you down gradually, and then starts to throw his shots. Pereira was fighting like a man with an early evening dinner reservation. He went straight in there and just let his shots go. Hurt Ankalaev early with a huge right hand, and then it just went from there. He just overwhelmed Ankalaev with strikes. Ankalaev ends up on the ground. Pereira absolutely smashing him with nasty ground strikes. Some really, really good use of the 12-6 elbows, which if ever you wanted a like an example of why 12-6 elbows should be in MMA and how you use them effectively, this is the clip that people would use to justify this, because Alex Pereira, just perfect use of those elbows, just transition from the punches, the downward punches, which obviously were having an effect, but so much more leverage and power in those elbows, and he switched to those elbows, and Ankalaev was just he was trapped. He had nowhere to go. The referee telling Magomed Ankalaev to get out of there. He's got to get out of danger, but he wasn't able to, or couldn't, or didn't want to, whatever it was. He was just turtled up, covering up, and was taking an absolute shellacking from Alex Pereira. Eventually, the fight gets waved off. Just 80 seconds was all it took for Alex Pereira to capture, or recapture rather, the UFC undisputed light heavyweight title. And it looked like he was about to cut a promo in wrestling terms on John Bones Jones. I think he was going to call for a fight with John Bones Jones, maybe at the White House next year. Obviously, there's all this talk about this White House show, which I think is going to be on June 14th next year. We'll see how all this pans out. But John Bones Jones wants to be on that card. Alex Pereira was going to call for a heavyweight fight with Johnny Bones, but obviously in the lead up to that fight, we had the tragic news of the passing of John Jones's brother, Arthur Jones, who was Super Bowl winning player for the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL. Obviously, far too young for someone to pass away. I think he was in his late 30s, early 40s, maybe. But yeah, it passed away during the week, and Pereira basically took time out of his post-fight interview to pay his respects and asked for the T-Mobile Arena, all 20,000 of them, to take a moment of silence in respect for John Jones. This was all done through a translator as well, which made it a little disjointed. But brilliantly, the T-Mobile Arena heard what was being said and complied, and we had this remarkable moment of silence for a few seconds in the arena. You've just had absolute chaos ensuing just moments earlier, and then Pereira was able to completely stop all of the noise so that people could just have a moment to pay their respects to John Jones's brother Arthur, who sadly passed away. That was a really poignant moment, and what it also showed, as well as the respect level and the class of the man, it shows you the command that he has over the fan base, and for a man that popular, if he was just a prelim fighter, I think he might have struggled to get the same response. But Alex Pereira just had the crowd in the palm of his hand there and was able to let that moment happen. And I know Johnny Bones was really, really grateful for that, and posted on social media almost immediately afterwards, to sort of show that, I think. But back to the performance, Alex Pereira, wow. That is the Alex Pereira that we know. That is the Alex Pereira we want to see. And that is the Alex Pereira who I think wants to move up to heavyweight. And Dana White, in his post-fight press conference, said, "But this is a guy that fought at middleweight. I don't know if we want a guy fighting at heavyweight that used to fight at middleweight." I think he needs to forget that. I think he needs to park the knowledge that he fought at middleweight and think to himself, how the hell did he fight at middleweight, rather than, yeah, this guy fought at middleweight. He fought on Saturday night. He must have been like 230, 235 when he was in the cage on fight night. He is a big human being, and he cuts a lot of weight to make 205. I don't know how he made 185. He was so skinny when he fought at 185 pounds. And you see him at light heavy, he looks big. Imagine him without having any weight cut, getting in there and fighting at heavyweight. I'd like to see that. I would like to see that. And in a heavyweight division that is, let's be honest, a little bit lacking in star power, the addition of Alex Pereira would really spice things up. We've got a lot of strikers in that heavyweight division. You imagine plugging Alex Pereira in there. So look, we're not going to throw you straight in there with Aspinall. Let's give you a fight or two just to really build things up. He could take his pick of anyone in the top 15, and he'll probably beat them. You know, he's big enough, strong enough, and hits hard enough to put anybody away. And his striking will stack up against anybody in that division. So I would love to see him make the move up to heavyweight. It means that light heavyweight will be back in flux again, which would be a bit frustrating, and I think the UFC might push back for that reason alone. Light heavyweight needs a champion. They had a dominant force in Magomed Ankalaev, who only held the belt for one fight, was not a crowd-pleasing fighter to watch. The fans haven't really taken to him. Pereira demolishes him. So we'll see what happens next. There are two fighters immediately in line to take on Alex Pereira for the title. We will talk about that in a little bit. But for now, Alex Pereira, king of the castle at 205 pounds. The light heavyweight champion is back on top at 205. All right, that was not the only title fight on the card on Saturday night, UFC 320. Merab Dvalishvili put his bantamweight title on the line against Cory Sandhagen. I was really looking forward to this fight just for the stylistic differences here. We've seen Merab demolish and dominate his opposition on his way through to winning the title and then retaining it several times. Cory Sandhagen was going to bring something a little bit different to the party. He's got rangy striking. He's got good control of range. He's got excellent finishing skills. And he's got solid takedown defense. So we thought, how would he go here against Merab, who his nickname is the Machine, and it could not be more aptly named, right? And Sandhagen had a decent first round, I thought. I thought Sandhagen had a good first round, and it was like, oh, okay, we could be in for something interesting here, because Sandhagen was landing his shots. He was walking Merab onto some stuff, and it was like, okay, this could get really interesting here. But Merab then just steamrolled him, just absolutely steamrolled him. And it was only really in the last round. I think Sandhagen clipped him in like the last minute or so of the round. But Merab put on another clinic, really, of just pressure wrestling and just dominance, as he retained his title once again. Unbelievable performance by the Machine, Merab Dvalishvili. 49-45 twice. There's a 10-8 in there, which I think might have been the second round or the third round. Then 49-46 to Merab Dvalishvili. So the Georgian holds on to his championship belt with relative ease. You take a look at his record, he is an absolute monster at 135 pounds. He captured the title at UFC 306 back in September last year against Sean O'Malley. He then beats Umar Nurmagomedov, who a lot of people picked to beat him. But he beat Umar on the scorecards to register his first title defense. Then he defeats Sean O'Malley in a rematch, north-south choke finish in round 3 in New Jersey, UFC 316. And now he defeats Cory Sandhagen. But before all of those title fights, he beat Henry Cejudo, he beat Peter Yan, he beat Jose Aldo, he beat Marlon Moraes, he beat Cody Stamann, John Dodson, Gustavo Lopez. He's beat so many good fighters on his way up. Because don't forget, on his way up, when it looked like he was every inch a contender, he wasn't going to fight for the belt because his friend and training partner, Aljamain Sterling, was the bantamweight champion. And it was only when Aljo was dethroned and then moved up that Merab really got, had the shackles taken off. Merab could have been champion 2-3 years ago. And we could be talking already about the most dominant championship run in UFC history. I think we really could. But right now, he's on a different planet to everybody else at 135 pounds. That title defense was title defense number 3. He equaled the record for the most bantamweight title defenses. I think he surpassed 100 takedowns in the UFC. So, is it 100 takedowns or 100 Yeah, 100 takedowns in the UFC landed. So amazing stuff from Merab Dvalishvili, who, as we say, he is a machine. He is a machine. He is a dominant force. And the big question now is, who on earth are they going to give him next? And whoever it is, he's going to be in trouble. The one he wants to face is Peter Yan, and I would love to see that rematch of Peter Yan. Peter Yan, for me, is still one of the top 3 bantamweights on the planet. All the while he's fit and in form, there's not many in the world who can beat Peter Yan, and I think his combination of boxing and defensive wrestling might be something. Having already fought Merab once, tasted that experience, he's best placed, arguably, to go in there and put on a good performance and test Merab in ways that maybe he hasn't been pushed before. So we'll see how that one goes. But that's for a little further down the line. I know Merab wants to try and get that fight in by the end of the year. Why not? Let's book it in for that December pay-per-view. Merab versus Yan. That would be an exciting rematch for the undisputed bantamweight title. But Merab, just utter dominance. It feels like you can't say Merab Dvalishvili without saying dominant at some point, either just before or just after, because that is just how he is. He's a great character and a lovely man as well. He's such a positive character. Great to chat to. Got to chat to him in Vegas just before his fight with Cory was officially announced. I think so I spoke to him and Cory separately on the same day. And all things were trending towards them being matched against each other. But wow, Merab Dvalishvili, probably, is he the pound for pound best in the UFC right now? I know he might not have the most fashionable fighting style in terms of striking, but if we're looking just pure dominance of a weight class, and he's right there. He's right there. If he's not in your top 3, then you're not. I don't think you're paying enough attention. I think he's definitely a top 3 pound for pound fighter right now. Maybe top 2, and maybe even top 1. He's that good. So Really looking forward to seeing, hopefully, him back in there by the end of the year. But when he does decide to take a rest, it'll be very well earned. Let's put it like that. He is a man with a limitless gas tank, but surely even he needs a holiday at some point. But wow, what a performance from the machine, Merab Dvalishvili, at UFC 320, and still bantamweight champion of the world. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about it. The light heavyweight main card fight between Jiri Prochazka and Khalil Rountree Jr. I said leading into this fight, this was a potential fight of the night candidate. Could potentially be a fight of the year candidate. And oh my goodness, did that fight deliver or what? What a performance from both men in this fight for very different reasons, right? This was a fight, wasn't so much a fight of two halves. It was a fight of two pieces. We had the first 2 rounds of this fight were undeniably, undoubtedly Khalil Rountree Jr.'s rounds. He was phenomenal in those first 2 rounds. RDX athlete, of course, RDX Sports ambassador, Khalil Rountree, looked like $1 million in this fight. He really did. First 2 rounds, his striking was crisp, accurate. Every time Prochazka opened up to throw anything, he got stung, he got punished. Rountree had him well scouted, and it seemed like everything Prochazka tried to do, Rountree already had the answer. And for 2 rounds, it looked one-sided, and very surprisingly one-sided. And I say that not as any kind of negative comment towards either man, because I think anybody who's seen Khalil fight, and particularly saw him fight against Alex Pereira, knew that he was going to be a live underdog in this fight, because he was a betting underdog, but he was certainly a live underdog in this fight. But to see how comprehensively he was just piecing up Jiri Prochazka through the first 2 rounds was quite something to see. It really was. And I think everybody watching was hugely impressed with how Khalil went about his business in those first 2 rounds. He was cruising. And when I say cruising, I don't mean he had his foot off the pedal. He was doing everything right, and everything was trending towards a decision victory for Khalil Rountree. Maybe a 3rd round finish if he caught something clean, but he was certainly dominant in that fight through 10 minutes. And Jiri Prochazka, he did not look himself through those 2 rounds, largely down to the way Khalil was fighting him. But there were some little telltale signs that maybe things weren't quite right with Prochazka. We couldn't quite see. His movement's a bit herky-jerky anyway at the best of the times, but he looked a little bit strange on his feet. His balance looked a little bit off. He looked almost like he had an ankle problem at one point. He was getting visibly frustrated. Like, you don't often see a fighter showing the signs of visible frustration that we saw from Jiri Prochazka in this fight. He was stepping in, getting ready to launch something, and then he'd get hit with a 2-piece. Pow, pow. And then Prochazka would take a step back and just sort of go, sort of shake his head and get really upset. And it was remarkable, because what we were seeing was a former world champion who was looking to get back to the top of the division getting comprehensively pieced up by Khalil Rountree Jr., himself a former title challenger who had a big point to prove himself. And if you sat everybody down after 10 minutes and said, who's going to win this fight? I would say 90% of people would say Khalil Rountree's got this one in the bag. If this continues the way it has in these first 2 rounds, Rountree has got this in the bag. Maybe he could push and get a finish, but basically there's a 3-round decision here just waiting to be claimed, because Khalil fought a near perfect 2 rounds. Now, we look at round 3. Jiri Prochazka comes out for round 3 and engages berserker mode. He just decides, right, everything I've tried in rounds 1 and 2 did not work. Rountree had an answer to everything. So the best thing he could do at that point is just ask Khalil Rountree too many questions for him to deal with. And that's basically how it was. Rountree had the answer to everything, all the while Prochazka was trying to pick his moment. So Prochazka just turned on the fire hose, basically, and just went straight at him and tried to just drown him with strikes, which he eventually did. It was an incredible, incredible turnaround. Prochazka, I think, took the view that, look, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose. Losing by knockout, trying to win, is no worse. It is no worse than losing the decision. So he went in there with the view that, I think, I'm going to get hit. I'm going to get hit quite a lot. But in order to do it, in order to land my stuff, that's going to have to happen. So he just decided, I'm going to walk through anything Khalil throws in that third round, and I'm going to land some of my biggest, heaviest stuff. And that's what he did. It was an amazing, amazing third round. Some of the exchanges we saw between those two were insane. One of the rounds of the year, I would say, that third round between Prochazka and Rountree. Not just because of the action that happened, did it, but the context of it as well. Like, Prochazka was barely in this fight heading into the third, and he suddenly just says, "No, not today. I'm not letting it happen like this." And he just digs deep and produces 5 minutes, well, 3 minutes and 4 seconds to be exact, of absolute hellfire and fury as he just takes it to Khalil Rountree Jr., stops him, knocks him out, sends him face first into the canvas, and unbelievable performance. I don't think there was a person sitting down by the time that knockout punch was landed. It was just an insane third round, one of the best rounds of the year, one of the comebacks of the year, and a fight that we talked leading in about whoever won this fight would need to do something very special to leapfrog Carlos Ulberg for the next title fight against, as we know now, Alex Pereira. I think Jiri Prochazka might have done it, I really do. Because that was just so insanely crazy. And the way he just refused to lose, and the way he just bit down on his mouthpiece and threw all caution to the wind and just threw the kitchen sink at Khalil Rountree in that third round. That is the kind of fighting mentality and approach that Dana White loves. That's what he preaches to the fighters in the Ultimate Fighter house. That's what he wants to see from fighters who step into the UFC Apex on the Contender Series. He wants people who are going to leave it all in the octagon. And boy, did Jiri Prochazka do that in that third round. He gets the knockout win and puts himself, I think, next in line for a shot at Alex Pereira and the light heavyweight title. And that would obviously be a rematch. I think it'd be a third fight actually between them. So, but that fight would be absolutely bonkers, especially if Prochazka was to fight in that same manner. But wow, what a performance from Jiri Prochazka. It's also possible if Pereira does have this little busman's holiday and moves up to heavyweight to take on John Jones, you could easily book Prochazka versus Ulberg, and that would be the perfect either interim title fight if Pereira steps up to heavy, interim title fight, or a number one contender fight. And would be an absolute banger of a fight because Carlos Ulberg, slick, polished kickboxing style, basically has all the tools in the bag from a striking perspective to win a fight, and was absolutely clinical against Dominic Reyes just a week or so ago. Jiri Prochazka, not the polished, precise striker that Carlos Ulberg is. Jiri Prochazka is just a monster, and he will throw as many limbs at you as is necessary until he gets the victory. So that would be a real clash of styles, but it'd be a hell of a fight. It would be a hell of a fight. So if we don't get Prochazka versus Pereira next, and we don't get Ulberg versus Pereira next, then Prochazka versus Ulberg is almost as good. Almost as good. So the light heavyweight division has a little bit of pep to it right now, and that's really good to see because sometimes it's been criticised as being, a bit of a poor relation in terms of talent and quality. So, but at the very top of that division, there's some real star power now, and we've got some real quality at the top there. And let's not forget, Khalil Rountree will be back. This is. He looked every inch a championship contender in this fight, just as he did against Alex Pereira. And that sort of performance through those first 2 rounds against almost anybody in the division will get him the win. So I don't think we're going to see the last of Khalil Rountree Jr. as a light heavyweight contender. In fact, I think we're still seeing him improve. I thought he looked better in this fight than he did against Pereira. I think we're still seeing the levels of improvement. And yeah, a classier, more respectful individual you could not wish to meet. Khalil Rountree is a top quality human being, a top quality fighter, and I know everybody at RDX is very proud to have him represent the brand. And yeah, he didn't get his hand raised on this occasion, but he showed in his performance that he is right there as one of the very best light heavyweights on the planet. And hopefully he'll go away, heal his wounds, take a bit of time, and come back maybe early next year and try and make 2026 the biggest year yet for the Warhorse Khalil Rountree Jr. Huge performance from him. Great respect to him, but it wasn't his night at UFC 320. That belonged to Jiri Prochazka, who is now looking at getting right back in there for the UFC light heavyweight title. Okay, let's round out the other business from the main pay-per-view card at UFC 320. Great performance at 145 pounds. Youssef Zalal has been in the UFC for a fair while now. He's been he was kind of like a hot prospect early on, and he kind of hit a bit of a brick wall at some point in his career. He seems to have gone over that, and now he is well and truly in the mix at 145 pounds. He was given an acid test this past weekend against Josh Emmett, who has faced a who's who at 145 pounds and has been right at the very top of the division. Some of the most vicious knockouts you will ever see in the UFC have been delivered by Josh Emmett. He is an absolute savage. His knockout of Bryce Mitchell alone is just one of the scariest knockouts you will ever witness in an MMA fight. Absolutely devastating power. Youssef Zalal made sure that power was rendered obsolete and a non-factor. He gets the fight to the mat quickly, gets stacked up on top of Josh Emmett, works an armbar. Emmett tries to defend as best he can, but he's just delaying the inevitable. Eventually, Zalal gets the extension, gets the tap. 1 minute 38 seconds is all Youssef Zalal needed to pick up that big win. And he is now right in the mix at 145 pounds. He's a fun character to listen to. He's got bundles of energy. He's a fun fighter to watch as well. And it's good to see new faces move into championship contention, move into into that upper echelon of a weight class. Just freshens things up a bit. And Youssef Zalal is one of those. So we'll see how he gets booked next. But he is super impressive, and it was a really big performance from him. Just checking out his record. Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in a row. 8 fights in a row he's won. He drew with Damon Blackshear back in 2022 on his in a bantamweight fight. He then moved back to featherweight and has won 8 straight. Edwin Chavez, Jake Childers, Vadim Zadnipriani. See, these were outside of the UFC with a promotion called Sparta Combat. Then rejoins the UFC for his second stint with the promotion. Beats Billy Quarantillo, beats Jano Aarons, beats Jack Shaw. Anybody who knows Jack Shaw, if you beat him, you're legit, because Jack is a superb fighter. He then beats Calvin Kattar, another one. He's like a gateway. He's become a bit of a gatekeeper, unfortunately, for him. People think gatekeeper is a bit of a derogatory term, but if you beat Calvin Kattar, you're an elite featherweight. He beat Calvin Kattar in February this year over 3 rounds, and then he submits Josh Emmett on a pay-per-view main card in 1 round at UFC 320. Poor, what a performance! What a performance from Youssef Zalal, and the fighter who used to go by the nickname of the Moroccan Devil. I don't know if he still does, but he is right in the mix at 145 pounds. Big night for him at UFC 320. It was a big night too for Big Joe Pyfer, taking on Abus Magomedov in a fight that he was hoping could kickstart his run into the 185 pound rankings. And he submits Abus Magomedov in the second round. Had to make a few adjustments. Abus was landing some good stuff on him in the first round. Makes a few adjustments in the second round. Gets the submission by face crank. I think it was listed as a rear naked on the night, but it was more of a face crank. Gets the job done early in round 2. And now Joe Pyfer has a number next to his name, and he can start looking at some big fights at 185 pounds. He's another one who's come through the Contender Series, got a great backstory. He's a very intense individual. He's certainly got plenty of presence about him when he walks into a room, but he's also really talented fighter. He's got heavy hands, but he's also got good submissions as well, as we saw on Saturday night. I think people thought of him initially as a bit of a just a stand and bang artist, but no, he's got good submissions. well-rounded Joe Pyfer, and he's now moving his way up the UFC middleweight division. That is your main card for UFC 320. It was a great night at the top end of this fight card, but none bigger than the man at the very top, the new, for the second time, undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world, Alex Pereira. All right, before we leave you, let's run down the rest of the results from the preliminary card. The televised prelims, we've got 3 out of 4 fights went to a finish. On the TV portion of the prelims, Atiba Gautier taking on Tristan Vines. I feel a bit here for Tristan Vines. He came in his UFC debut on very short notice. Of all the people to be put in there with, Atiba Gautier is not the one you would pick. And Tristan Vines was basically running away for most of this fight. Once Atiba Gautier caught him, he knocked him out. That was basically the fight. 1 minute, 41 seconds. About a minute and a half of which was spent chasing Tristan Vines around the cage. Eventually, Atiba lands something big, and that was pretty much all she wrote. He is a terrifying individual. He really is. And Coach Carl Prince from Manchester Top Team has got himself an absolute savage on his hands. They're doing great things up there at Manchester Top Team. I should get up there and pay them a visit, really, and have a chat to a few of them, and maybe get some extra stuff for RDX. We'll look into that maybe. But they're doing some big things up there in Manchester Top Team, and Atiba Gautier is probably the scariest man in Europe right now. Like, I can't think of another other than Tom Aspinall, who is obviously, on top of the world in the UFC heavyweight division. If you're looking at fighters on the come up, Atiba Gautier is the one fight you do not want on your bout agreement. He is a scary, scary individual. If I was a light heavyweight, I wouldn't want to be fighting him. He hits so hard, and he's just got this natural power. So we'll see where he goes next. We'll see who he gets matched up with next. But boy, that is a scary prospect. Atiba Gautier against Tristan Vines. 1 minute, 41 seconds was all it took for him to close the prelims with a big KO. Daniel the Willy Cat Santos, interesting nickname, taking on Jusang Yu, Zombie Jr. in a catchweight fight. You miss weight. Supposed to be a 145-pound fight, and he could only make 153. So issues with the weight cut there, issues with the performance as well, because he got stopped by Daniel Santos. I know there was a lot of expectation on Jusang Yu. I think he might have been the betting underdog going into that fight, actually, which I thought was interesting. But the bookies were right. You never see a bookie on a bus, someone once told me. And that's kind of why. They know what they're doing. And Daniel Santos, who was the narrow favourite when I looked at the odds just before the fight, gets the finish, second round TKO stoppage, 21 seconds into the second round, and went on a bit of a rant about his team Shooter Box and how they need a bit more respect. I think anyone who's been in MMA for any length of time has got a lot of respect for Shooter Box. They are a long tenured gym, one of the legendary gyms of Brazilian MMA, and Daniel Santos is certainly not the only UFC name coming out of that gym right now. I mean, Ian Machado Gary calls that gym home, and he's doing incredible things, and he seems to have really found a proper home for himself at Shooter Box, having traveled the world, sort of checking out a few different places. That's where he settled. So Shooter Box is clearly one of the world's top teams. Daniel Santos was very keen to get that message across after his second round TKO victory. Really interesting stuff in the bantamweight division. Jacob Vichlash against Patchy Mix. The former KSW champion Vichlash gets the split decision victory over Patchy Mix. I thought Patchy Mix won this fight, 2 rounds to 1. But we had a split decision, and Mix ended up on the wrong end of it. And that's 2 fights in the UFC, 2 defeats in the UFC. Mix took it on the chin relatively well at the time. Excuse me, yawning. I am so tired. Been under the weather the last few days. But yeah, Mix bounced back. Looked decent early, but yeah, it's just there's something missing at the moment. He needs to just find that extra gear. We know how good he is. We know how good he can be. He just hasn't quite found his feet in the UFC yet. I think he'll get there, but He wasn't given a chance to do that on Saturday. Although, that said, I do think he won that fight. But there you go. Was it a robbery? No, it was a close fight. But I thought Mix won that fight 2-1. And the middleweight prelim between Edmen Shahbazyan versus Andre Muniz. We talked about this, I think, on last week's show. Real striker versus grappler matchup. And surprise, surprise, the striker won. 4 minutes, 58 seconds it took for Edmen to find his range, set his sights, and knock out Andre Muniz as he continues his impressive run. He's in good form right now, Edmen Shahbazyan. Early prelims weren't that much to write home about. No finishes. So if you were waking up, diving into the early prelims, it was scorecards all the way. Puna Soriano defeats Nikolai Veretennikov. Yana Santos defeats Macy Chasson. Macy Chasson came on very strong late on in that fight, but Santos had done enough to bank the first 2 rounds. Macy missed weight for that bout as well, so we'll see what happens there. She has missed weight in the past. I wonder whether they might... Well, there isn't a featherweight division anymore, is there? So we're not sure what's going to happen from that then. But Yana Santos getting the job done. Both women sort of in and around the rankings. Macy looked like she might have been the one in form heading in, but Yana did well to bank those first 2 rounds and weather the storm late on to get the decision win. Farid Basharat defeats Chris Gutierrez to stay undefeated. Ramiz Brahimaj with a great performance to submit Austin Vanderford in the second round. I said there wasn't a finish. Yes, there was. There it is. Submission, second round from Ramiz Brahimaj. And in the opening bout of the night, Veronica Hardy, who I'd love to see Veronica moved up a fight card. She seems to always be the first fight of the night. Maybe she likes it that way. I don't know. Maybe she likes to get in and out nice and early and enjoy the rest of the fights. I don't know, but she always seems to be opening up the fight card. But I'd like to see her featured further up. Maybe get her on a TV prelim. She's in a decent run of form now. She wins all 3 rounds against Brogan Walker, and she's improving fight to fight as well. You know, she's steadily improving her game, moving her way up the flyweight division, gradually increasing the level of opponents. So we'll see who she gets next. But that's a big important win for Veronica Hardy in the opening bout of the night. Just to wrap up the remaining business from that event, UFC 320. Fight of the night obviously goes to Jiri Prochazka and Khalil Rountree Jr. They both banked 50k each. Performance of the night, Alex Pereira gets 50k, Joe Pyfer gets 50k, and Jiri Prochazka gets another 50k. So big night for Jiri Prochazka. He gets the comeback win. He gets potentially the next title fight, and he gets $100,000 in his skyrocket at the same time. Not bad if you're Jiri Prochazka. Big night of fights, UFC 320. It started a little bit slow, built up as it went along, and came to an incredible crescendo in the main event. So I guess if that's how the fights are going to pan out, you want it to end up on a high, right? And I think the fans who left T-Mobile Arena on Saturday night certainly did that. UFC has an absolute savage at the top of their light heavyweight division, and there's a couple looking to challenge him just below him in the rankings. So fun times in the UFC light heavyweight division. But could we see Alex Pereira stepping up to heavyweight soon? Who knows? Could it be John Jones? Could it be the White House? Let's see how it all pans out. But for right now, Alex Pereira is the absolute best in the world at 205 pounds. Thank you so much for checking out the RDX Sports podcast this week. I apologise for the occasional yawning. I apologise for looking absolutely knackered. I am, unfortunately. I've been really struggling this week. So good to get this podcast out the door and done before we head into the next set of fights, which takes place in Rio de Janeiro this weekend, UFC Fight Night, where, keep an eye, it's a bit of a Brazil versus the rest of the world card. There's a Brazilian fighter in every single fight on the fight card. I think it's 13 fights on the card. There's a Brazilian in every fight. Could we get a fight card where every single fight is won by a Brazilian in Rio? That's one to watch out for on Saturday night. Charles Oliveira taking on Matheus Gamrot in the main event. It was going to be Charles Oliveira versus Rafael Fiziev. Fiziev injured, and now Gamrot steps in. Interesting change that. Obviously, Charles Oliveira was looking to take on a striker in Fiziev. Fiziev falls out, and now he's taking on Gamrot, who is a pure grappler, a wrestler, a grappler. doesn't really want to be spending any time standing and striking with Charlie Olives, that is for sure. So complete change of style, complete change of opponent, but that is your main event in Rio de Janeiro Saturday night. Pretty much Brazil versus the rest of the world. Let's see how many wins the Brazilians can stack up on home soil. The crowd will be crazy, they always are, and the fights are always well worth watching in that white-hot atmosphere in Rio. That is this Saturday night. We just talked about what happened last Saturday night. Thank you so much for checking out the show. Give us a follow on the socials. I am at Simon Head Sports on all social media platforms. You can also check out RDX Sports at RDX Sports on X or at RDX_sports on Instagram. And finally, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you never miss an episode of the RDX Sports podcast. Also on the YouTube channel, we have lots of product-related videos as well related to RDX's state-of-the-art combat sports gear. Well worth checking that stuff out as well. Head to rdxsports.com for all your combat sports equipment and apparel needs. And check out our combat sports coverage at blogs.rdxsports.com. That's about all we've got for you this week on the RDX Sports podcast. Thank you so much for checking us out. Enjoy the fights this weekend. UFC Rio should be an absolute barn burner. I'll catch up with you again next week.